guys, so this video is different. I know that I said that I have more story times, and don't worry, I do have more story times planned. I just decided that I put this video out while I have the idea. This video is going to be tips for going to concerts alone. I've done that multiple times myself. And I'd like to pass some of my experience on to you guys so that you guys can stay as safe as possible and still enjoy the things that you enjoy. A lot of these tips are good for going anywhere alone, especially as a young, single, super fly female like myself. Some of them I would hope are common sense, but some of them are also weird things that I've kind of picked up along the way. And with that being said, let's just go ahead and get into it. Yay! So first, there's some things that you should do before even going to the concert. Before you even get to the venue, before you show up there, there's some things that you should really consider doing. Now that being said, the first concert that I ever went to alone, I was not planning on going alone. My friend canceled on me on the last minute. I was already in line waiting to go to the venue. I mean, I don't blame her. I lived in Chicago and we'd had a pretty bad snowstorm, and she did not live in Chicago, so she couldn't get into the city. I decided that I wanted to go into the concert. I figured I paid for the tickets. I was seeing Our Last Night in Hands Like Houses, so I kind of really wanted to go. So sometimes you might not get the opportunity to do some of these things ahead of time, but in general, even if you're going with friends, you should still probably do some of these tips. So before you go, or before you even buy tickets for that matter, you might want to stalk the venue. If it's a venue that you've been to plenty of times before, you know super well, you know the area, then you can probably skip this step. But if it's somewhere that you've never been to before, you're going to want to take a close look at it. You're going to want to look at the location, look at the neighborhood. You know, there are some venues that I would go onto Google Maps and do the street view and kind of stalk around a couple blocks and kind of realized it was maybe not the best area for me to be in alone. There was no close parking, there were a lot of dark alleyways, and a lot of the things look kind of run down, so you do want to be kind of wary of that. Also things like, how many people does this place hold? Are the doors big enough? There was one time that I went to a concert with one of my friends and we got there and they opened the doors, but they literally only had one door, one single person door into the venue, and it ended up taking them an hour and a half to get everybody from the line into the building. They ended up delaying the concert for quite a while because of that. It was something that the venue, I think, just hadn't totally anticipated. They were pretty new, and they didn't realize that if you have a sold-out show and the line wraps around the block, that's going to take a while to get everybody in. So things like that could be a factor, especially like that incident where it's the middle of wintertime in Illinois. Luckily, me and my friend had a pretty early spot in line, so we didn't have to wait very long. But there were people out there freezing their butts off for a good hour. You're going to want to find out as much as you can about the venue, if that means looking at pictures people have tagged on Instagram or Googling, whatever you have to do, you want to find out as much as you can before you go. Before you go, you want to tell somebody who's not going and who's more than likely going to be at least a little bit available what your plans are. You want to tell them where you're going, what time you're going, and more importantly, you want to tell them what your plans for after are. That means, yes, you have to make plans for after. Whether if that's taking an Uber home or catching a train or walking back to a hotel. You want to have solid plans in place before you go, and the most important part is you want to stick to those plans. If you don't stick to the plans and something goes wrong, nobody's going to know where you were or what you were doing or what you were supposed to be doing. All the information that they're going to have is what you tell them. So you want to stick to what you say, and if you decide to change those plans on the fly, you want to be able to reach out and tell that person. So make sure that it's someone that you're going to be able to text during the show or call or whatever you need to do. At risk of sounding like a middle-aged soccer mom, I'm going to tell you, eat before you go. Eating before you go is going to be a lifesaver at the end of the night. If you're old enough to drink, it'll help keep you from getting too drunk. And whether if you're old enough to drink or not, it just means that at the end of the night, you might not have to make that last-minute run to McDonald's or Taco Bell. You might think that you'll be fine after the show, but concerts take a lot out of you, and there have been so many times that afterwards I'm like, man, I just need to go find something, anything to eat. which as a group is usually totally fine, but as a single person, sometimes that can get a little bit sketchy. There are some venues where you'd have to walk alone or take an Uber alone a pretty long ways just to get some food. And if you didn't drive yourself, it just might not be the safest thing that you could possibly do. But don't eat just anything. So I recommend eating like a nice salad or something healthy, or even something bad for you, just not nachos. I ate a massive amount of fully loaded nachos one time before a concert, and let me tell you, there was only so much bouncing I could take before I realized what a massive and horrifying mistake I'd made. A massive, massive miscalculation on my part. Rest in peace, my bowels. So if you're a girl like me and you're trying to figure out what to pack in your purse, or you're a guy and you just load your pockets with things, I don't know what you guys do with pockets. If you have mace or a personal alarm or something like that, and you check with the venue ahead of time and find out that yes, you can bring it in and it makes you feel safer, you can go ahead and do that. But if you're like me and you don't have any of those things, and even if you did, you don't think that you'd remember to use them when the time came, here are some other things that you might want to consider packing. If you can, bring Band-Aids. That's just something that I, as the superb queen of klutzes, can attest to that I've needed on multiple occasions, whether if it's because my shoes have bored into the backs of my feet and now I have blisters, or I've fallen down and scraped my knee, or I've randomly run into a little metal thing sticking out of a pole and ended up with more blood coming out of my body than I had anticipated that night. I carry actually a really tiny first aid kit that you can get at like most CVS's that are like this big, and it fits super well into my purse and it's super worth it. I keep Zyrtec in it, I keep a little bit of gauze, I keep some of those alcohol prep pads. Those actually come in handy also just to clean off your hands if they're sticky. There's always something sticky at venues. Always bring cash with you, even if you're planning on using a credit card for most of the night. To be honest, you just never know when you're going to need cash. Just in case of the venue or anywhere else that you're planning on going doesn't take the card that you have, or in case if you lose your credit card or something happens like that, you want to be covered and know that you have some backup money. It doesn't need to be a lot, but just enough so that if you needed something in an emergency, you would have it. Now, something that I randomly bring whenever I go by myself to concerts is if my purse or bag is big enough, which usually it is. If I'm going by myself, I'm going to way overpack for these things because I'm just paranoid, is I like to bring a book. And the reason for that is that if there's any awkward downtime and I need something to do, I can pull out my book and I can sit there and read. And it might sound strange and you might be like, who reads at a concert venue? But I'm here to tell you I do. I've done it multiple times in between sets, whenever I've been waiting for a concert to get started and kind of hanging around the bar area. I like to sit down and read because 1, it passes the time. 2, it makes you look busy, so not super approachable. But 3, unlike something like headphones, you still have all of your senses available to you. You can look up, you can hear things around you, you're still super aware of your surroundings, which is something that you definitely want to be if you're going to a concert alone. And whenever I say bring a book, you can bring any book you want, though I wouldn't recommend bringing like a full Harry Potter or, something massive. You do want a book that's going to fit like nicely in your purse, so like if you're a fan of like The Great Gatsby or like My Antonia, something thin, just for the love of God, don't bring like the entirety of The Lord of the Rings or like a complete anthology of Shakespeare's works. You don't want to be lugging that thing around. Another random side effect about reading a book if you are over 21 and you are drinking at a venue I've found is that even if you're rereading the same sentence over and over because you're just not getting it, you're going to look a lot more sober than you might actually be. What I'm talking about are some casual acquaintances that will recognize your face, that you can be a little bit friendly with. For instance, when I went to that concert unexpectedly by myself, when I first walked in, I noticed that there were some teenage girls and they were all trying to get a selfie together, but they couldn't all fit. So all I did was go up to them and say, hey, do you want me to take a picture for you guys? And they were like, oh yeah, that'd be cool, that'd be great. So I took the picture for them, and then the rest of the night, they knew who I was, they would smile, we'd have a friendly like, hey, what's up? And it was nice knowing that I had a group of people there that if something went wrong, I could have probably gone up to them and say, hey, I think I might need a little bit of help. That same night, I also made friends with one of the merch guys. I went up to the table and I kind of joked around with him. And later that night when someone was being creepy, I just went and I hung around that same merch table. Sure enough, the creepy guy didn't want to be creepy with a witness there. I also made friends with two girls who were clearly Instagram models and they were trying to get good pictures. Then they sat down, they talked to me, and since they were my age and they were also young and single and it was just the two of them there, I told them what had happened, that I was there alone. And they said, if you need any help, we're right here, you can just let us know. That's the thing about a lot of concerts I found is that while there are going to be some predators, there are a lot of good people, and if you can find the good people, you'll be set for the rest of the night. And if you don't feel comfortable making friends with complete strangers, there's one person that's pretty easy to make friends with, and that is the bartender. Even if you're underage and all you're buying are Cokes and sodas or waters, you want to make sure that you tip them well. It's been my experience at concerts and otherwise that bartenders tend to remember the people who give good tips. In general, you should be tipping your bartenders well. That's just common courtesy. But especially if you're somewhere alone, you want to tip them well because once again, you want them to remember you. And for most bartenders, if you've been a model customer, if you've been tipping well, if you haven't been causing them problems, if you haven't been giving attitude, if you've been real nice and understanding, if something goes wrong and you don't feel comfortable, you can go up to them and say, hey, I'm not in the best situation. Can you help me? And it's been my experience that more often than not, they're willing to help. It doesn't look good on a bar to have people not feeling safe in their facilities, so they will usually go out of their way to make sure that you're okay. Along with that sentiment, you also need to not be afraid to say something if something feels off. If you feel like somebody's following you, or someone's acting suspicious, or you feel uncomfortable, or somebody even just keeps coming up to you and making small talk that you don't really want to talk to, don't be afraid to reach out to a bouncer or a staff member or a bartender and let them know your concerns. They're there to help you, and you shouldn't be afraid to take advantage of that. Really, throughout your entire life, you shouldn't be afraid to ask for help when you need it. And also, it's really important to trust your gut. If you feel like something's weird or something's wrong, don't be afraid to act on your instincts and avoid it and walk away if you need to. One time I was in a train station by myself, and there were these two guys that were dressed eerily similar, but they kept standing super far apart from each other, and they were carrying these boxes. And they were just walking around, and I could see them watching people, and sure enough, they started to follow me, probably once they realized that I was alone. And I felt really uncomfortable. So what I did was, I just picked out the nearest group of businessmen who looked like they knew where they were going, what they were doing, and I just kind of followed them around the train station for a little bit and tried to make it look like I knew what I was doing and what was going on, and sure enough, the guys eventually stopped tailing me. But they were definitely following me because I started doing some real crazy turns, and they still managed to keep up. I can't say enough times that in general, you just want to be aware of your surroundings. This next tip is going to be something that's a little unconventional, and I don't think that many people necessarily consider it. But sometimes mosh pits are safer than not mosh pits. Now, before you go into a mosh pit, you definitely want to read the crowd. That's generally something that you want to do at a concert so that you don't get in it over your head and you don't end up having a bad time because you're in something rougher than you wanted to be. But the nice thing about mosh pits is that everybody's so crammed together that nobody can move. That means that nobody can just grab you and pull you away from the crowd to get you alone. And almost every mosh pit I've been in, I've found that the people are usually super polite and super aware of each other because we're all in this together. We're all smashed together. And while the band is playing and everybody's jumping around, nobody's going to be paying attention to you. Nobody's going to even notice that you're alone. They're all going to be too focused on the show and too focused on their own experience to pay any mind to yours. With that in mind though, if you get really unlucky and you're next to some like grade A jerkwads, don't be afraid to get out if you need to get out. There have been plenty of times that I have regretted my neighbors and I have just left when I needed to. And like I said before, The night that I ended up at a concert alone too, it really helped that I had a friend that I was able to text the whole night. Whenever someone was being weird or creepy, I would just start texting them and make myself look busy. If you're in a really awkward and really uncomfortable situation, you can also always just make it look like you're waiting for fake friends that are going to show up. Nobody needs to know that you're alone if you don't think that they should know. No matter what, if you're going to go to a concert alone, you need to make sure that you look confident, you act like you belong there, like you should be there, like you know what you're doing. If anyone with predatory intentions gets the feeling that you're uncomfortable or you're insecure, you've just put a big target on your back that you probably don't want. At the end of the night, after the concert, what you want to do is you want to stick to the plans that you had laid out ahead of time. If something changes, make sure that it's a change that you really want to be making. Like, really think it through. And when you're planning, you want to make sure that you have backup plans, just in case if anything happens or falls through or something goes just a way that you didn't anticipate it going. You want to be careful when you're leaving a venue, because I've run into multiple venues where once you leave out the doors, you can't come back in. One time I got a notification that my cab had arrived, so I walked outside and my cab was nowhere in sight. Well, I couldn't get back into the venue where it was safe, so I had to sit outside and talk on the phone with the cab company and let them know that the cab hadn't actually showed up. And I asked if I could stay on the line with them until they showed, because I was alone, basically in an alleyway in a not so great neighborhood in Chicago. I understand why venues have that policy in place, but it's not always the safest when you're alone. So when you're ready to leave, you want to make sure that you're really ready to leave and that you're not planning on coming back in. That's about all the tips that I can really think of for now. I hope that everybody out there stays safe. I hope that people aren't afraid to do things alone. It's a scary world, but that doesn't mean that you should stop yourself from experiencing things that you want to experience and enjoying the things that you want to enjoy. I hope you all have a great time at whatever show you're going to, and I hope that some of what I've said today will help. I'll see you all in the next video. It's been real. It's been really real. Have a lovely day.